And the first talk is by James O'Shaughnessy from Ireland, and he will talk to us about target selective treatment in suckler beef herds.
Good morning. I suppose in case I get into trouble later, I'd like to straight away acknowledge all co-authors who gave significant input into this study. So the basis of this talk is targeted selective treatment in suckler beef herds. We heard a little bit this morning about targeted selective treatments and explain the rationale why in this preliminary study we use this approach. So resistance to wormers has been increasingly reported in cattle nematode populations worldwide. So we need to get smarter, we need to develop more novel, sustainable approaches to actually control nematode challenge in cattle at pasture. That's one point I'd like to make. Become more efficient in how we control nematode challenge. At a local level here in Ireland, with regard to suckler calf production, it's a sector that the returns are quite low. There's a lot of money spent on feed costs as probably the main variable cost. So there's an increasing focus on actually increasing the level of grass utilisation in the diet, be it grazed grass or conserved grass. This in itself, and throwing the added extra of potential climate change, may in the long run lead to increased parasite challenge. So we really need to develop ways how we can treat the right animals at the right time. As the title suggests, targeted selective treatments are one potential treatment option that's been investigated currently. The aim is to control the challenge, but while also delaying the development of resistance. Now, targeted selective treatments involve treating individual animals as opposed to an entire group. We heard in the excellent keynote speak this morning about TSDs and the difficulties associated with identifying a proper TSD indicator. This is a big problem that we have. And I'll discuss this a little bit further. So, what indicators can we possibly use to decide when treatment should be given to an animal? As we'll see with cattle at pasture, many potential factors can affect performance. You can have parasitic, obviously, which is what we were looking at. So you have lungworm, osteoarthritis, so forth, potentially coccidiosis, etc. But you also have a lot of non-parasitic factors that will affect performance. And particularly in suckler beef calves, you're going to things obviously like genotype of dam, sire genotype, pasture quality. Maybe there's an underlying trace element problem. In Ireland, we have a lot of copper deficiency related problems and so forth. So there are many potential factors that will affect performance. To date, in most of the work to date, all of the work done to date has been in first grazing season dairy calves as regards first grazing season cattle. And live weight gain has been the main indicator investigated to date. Unfortunately, and I suppose my main interest is in suckler beef calves because I keep a few cows at home for my sins, there are no guidelines in the literature on what you could potentially use as a TSD indicator. Previous research in Ireland has shown that this will probably have true parasitologist jumping up and down, but leaving out Coperia, but the two most pathogenic nematodes to consider are Osteoarthritis and lungworm, and this was the basis of our approach. Just a quick comment on pasture exposure in suckler beef calves in Ireland over the first grazing season. We can see that grass growth typically kicks off, depending on part of the country, but in general around March, reaching a peak May-June time, and declining back to pre-growth levels in November. So there's ample opportunity for exposure. Calves typically are born February, March and April, and weaning takes place, depending on where you're from, end of September, October and early November. So this is your typical grass growth and exposure curve for calves. So this trial basically mimicked that previous slide. So we had spring-born calves. Our trial commenced on the 28th of June, which was day 0. We had 99 spring-born calves, 2 continental beef sires, so we had Charolais and Blonde Aquitaine, and with 4 different dam genotypes. We had Limousin Frisian cows, Limousin Simmental, Limousin Charolais, and Charolais Simmental. I must say in Ireland that there is a heavy predominance of use of continental breeds within our suckler beef herds. So this was a reflection of that. So calves were assigned by age, weight, sex, dam and sire breed to treatments, and we had 2 treatment groups, positive control and a TST group. As I said before, we had no information or no previous guidelines to go on, so we had to do as best we could as regards when to intervene with treatment. So the trial itself was conducted at Chagas Grange Beef Research Centre. We had a 26-hectare farmlet on site with 28 paddocks, and calves were rotationally grazed with their dams approximately every 3 to 4 days in a 21-24-day grazing cycle. Pre-grazing heights were typically 10 to 12 centimetres, with a post-grazing height of 4 centimetres. So as regards the trial itself, so every 3 weeks from day 0, June 24th to October 30th, calves were weighed, blood and fecal sampled. We determined plasma pepsinogen concentrations. We did fecal egg counts. We looked for lungworm larvae every 3 weeks. On day 0 and day 124, we also looked at calf plasma copper concentrations. We also looked for antibodies for lungworm using recombinant major sperm protein as antigen. Based on a previous study we did on beef farms in Ireland and also the practices on this particular research centre, calves were treated, these suckler beef calves were treated every 3 weeks, every 6 weeks on day 0, 41 and 82 with ivermectin given subcutaneously. With regard to the TST calves, and this created the biggest problem as regards how to treat them. Would we go on live weight gain? Would we go on direct parasite indicators? And this created a bit of fuss with supervisors and looking at literature and trying to come up with what best do we use. So we were really worried about lungworm, dictyococcus vipers and ostratages, the two main babies to worry about. So from this point of view, this is not meant to be a concept of proof. This was just an intervention level we set where we didn't want to interfere with calf performance and our welfare. So if a suckler calf that were done every 3 weeks, if they were Behrman positive, a lungworm larvae were detected in fecal samples, or their fecal egg count exceeded 200 eggs per gram with a plasma PEP greater than 2 international units per litre, we treated them. As I would suggest, don't repeat this at home. So all calves were weaned on day 110. All calves, both TST and control, were treated with ivermectin on day 124, which was 9 days pre-housing. With regard to results, so apart from the pre-housing dose, which is common to both treatment groups, none of these TST calves were treated at Pasture whatsoever. We failed to detect any lungworm larvae throughout the entire study period and fecal samples, which was very, very surprising. With regard to the lungworm ELISA, and it probably shows that I wasn't too awake when I was doing the Behrmans, but on day 0, 3 calves were identified as being seropositive using a lungworm ELISA, whereas by day 124 we had 28 beef calves, so a quarter of the calves seroconverted during the study period. We also want to look at plasma copper, and I'm sure I get a question on this, but it's often one of those things that's not included in a parasite study, but I think it's very important because it potentially may affect calf performance. We can see in day 0, the start of the study, the LS mean across treatment groups was 13.3 micromoles per litre. This actually declined to 3.4 at the end of the study, so which is very, very low. With regard to calf performance, despite the control calves getting 3 doses every 6 weeks plus a pre-housing dose, there was no significant difference between the treatment groups. So TST calves gained 0.94 kilograms per day, whereas our controls gained 0.89. As I said, the p-value it didn't approach significance. Another thing which I think is very, very important in these calves as regards live weight gain is obviously dam breed. We can see Limousin Friesian calves perform greatest 0.99 kilograms per day. They perform the best. And down at the other end, we had calves born from Limousin cross-cemental dams doing 0.86. There was a significant difference between calves born to these two dam genotypes. With regard to fecal egg counts, in the first 2 months of the study, fecal egg counts remained very low. Thereafter, they increased to reach a peak on day 82, and thereafter decreasing. over the course of the entire study, there was a significant difference in fecal Akon values in TST calves relative to control calves. If we were to look at plasma pepsinogen concentrations, these were very, very low throughout the entire study period. And there was no significant difference between our treatment groups. So, p-value of 0.535. So, in conclusion, this really was a preliminary study introduced at TST in suckler beef calves. We didn't know, really didn't know what indicators potentially to use, so we had to come up with ones. However, I suppose this study for us highlighted a number of important points that, based on this study, now this study was repeated the following year as well, where we also looked at pasture larval counts. We can see that challenge in these calves can potentially be controlled with absolutely minimal anthelmintic treatment, without any real effect on performance, simply because exposure levels were very, very low. Based on the result of this study and a study we conducted the following year, I would strongly question the use of live weight gain as a TST indicator in suckler beef calves, given that there are many, probably more important factors that actually will affect performance. As we can see from the PP values of pepsinogen concentrations, these calves, which we did in a later study, can see that because of their low exposures in season 1, it's really in season 2 where the action happens as regards clinical parasitism in these animals. We also saw that lungworm circulated at very low levels. There was an absence of clinical disease in these calves. We didn't find any lungworm in the Behrman samples we used using the Behrman technique, but yet we did 25% of animals end up being seropositive. So lungworm larvae can, as we would expect, circulate at potentially low levels in these first grazing season calves. So I would like to thank you for your attention.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions in front here.
Thank you for your presentation. Have you identified which parasites was involved?
We did a repeat study the following year, and we found that Cuperia was the main one. But compared to a study on dairy calves or dairy to beef calves, the Cuperia level was actually increasing towards the end of the study period. So actually the level of exposure, we also got a bit of ostrategia, but Cuperia was there, but still at a very low level relative to the actual challenge in the animals. But essentially Cuperia and ostrategia. But there was no evidence, certainly the levels of Cuperia we found were tending to increase as calves were eating more herbage, which I suppose you would expect.
There's another question there.
Okay, just one short question. I might have missed it, but did the treated and untreated calves were in the same pasture?
Yeah, we'd four groups. So we had 2 TST groups and 2 control groups. So it was a 28 paddock system. So calves groups were rotationally grazed around the pastures based on pre and post grazing sward heights.
Okay.
So there was a potential for cross-contamination between paddocks.
Okay.
But overall, when we looked at this study again in year 2, we found that pasture larval counts across paddocks was actually very low.
Okay.
Is there another question? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.